Sky News understands that Britain is in discussions to send up to 10 tanks to Ukraine and a major step up in support against the Russian invasion. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi joins me now live from Kyiv with more on this story. What can you tell us at this stage, Alex?
Well, the fact that these discussions are happening is hugely significant. Obviously, it will be even more significant if tanks are donated by the British, and you do see them on the battlefield here. But I think it reflects what's going on wider amongst Western allies. Remember that these discussions are not just happening in London, they've been happening in Berlin, they've been happening in Paris and in the United States. Now, the Americans are already going to provide combat armoured vehicles, as are the Germans. Now, the reason that this is important is if you think back to the beginning of the conflict, there was great concern amongst Ukraine's allies that they didn't want to escalate what was already a very bad situation. Vladimir Putin had set down some very strict red lines. There was a large amount of nuclear saber rattling. But as this conflict has gone on, I think there is this sort of sense, really, that it can't escalate much more, and that some of the red lines that he has set are actually a bit more fluid than you might have thought. Now, the other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that Ukraine has had a large amount of success on the battlefield. It has the momentum and it has the initiative. Remember, at the beginning of the war, of course, people think that this country would be filleted by the Russian army very, very quickly. That hasn't come to pass at all. In fact, quite the opposite. And what we're now seeing is that Ukraine, arguably, in terms of military technology, now has a qualitative edge to the Russians with the kind of things that they've been given. Think about the HIMARS. This is an American long-range artillery system. It outperforms anything that the Russians have had. Now, when we see these combat armoured vehicles provided by the Germans and the Americans in theatre, and if, of course, they're joined by British tanks, again, we could see significant developments come around spring when the weather changes a little bit. What you will see is that the Ukrainians then have the ability to launch some pretty sophisticated counter-offensives, and you might see them breaking through Russian lands, other lines at the line of contact, successes similar to what we saw in Kherson. Now, the Russian reaction to all of this has been fairly furious. They accuse the Western allies of using Ukraine and Ukrainian blood to weaken Russia. They argue that all will happen is that this war will just go on much longer. They say that they will carry on fighting. They are a superior fighting force, and they will eventually win. Now, that may be true. It may not be true. But I think in a response to this, we are most likely to see sometime later in the new year Vladimir Putin announcing the mobilization of even more men. But I think the other takeaway point from all of this is that this war is not going to end in the next couple of months. It really is probably going to take the next year or so. But there are certainly many people in the West now who believe that Ukraine can be victorious over Russian forces.